So we're very happy about that bill. And again, we passed it with bipartisan numbers, and the president signed it, and it's going into law, and we can truly say we supported our troops. One of the couple of things we also did, we passed the biggest increase in veteran health care benefits in the history of the VA, $3.7 billion last year, $3.5 billion this year. That's because, one of the reasons because, not just because we think we have a moral obligation to do it, but because under the first 6 years of the Bush administration, and a Republican Congress, they cut it back. Thank you very much. Veterans health care, even though they kept saying we need to support our troops, they were cutting benefits to the VA health care benefits. And we have an unbelievable prospect ahead of us, a very daunting challenge with literally tens of thousands of cases of post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, we're going to be paying for years. And we weren't doing anything to even accommodate those things. We had waits just for people to determine their GI Bill benefits of 2 and 3 years. We just passed a new appropriation to add 1,800 claims processors to the VA so that they could begin to deal with this backlog of people, again, who have given their utmost for this country and have been left without much help. So we're trying to catch up in a lot of ways, but we're making some, I think, major strides. And we also passed the biggest appropriation in general for the VA in the 77-year history of the agency. So I think we're finally living up to our obligations to our veterans. Second question, that first one was from the League of Women Voters. Second one is, how can taxes and taxpayers be tapped to increase tax revenues to move toward a balanced budget since the deficit is climbing exponentially? I'm one who, when I ran, not just when I ran 2 years ago, but 4 years ago when there was another presidential election going on, some of you may remember an ad I ran where I just paid for it myself, where I was critical of the Bush tax cuts because they actually were benefiting people like me disproportionately when the disparity between the very wealthiest Americans and the average working family was growing greater and greater and greater, and is actually now at almost historic proportions. There was absolutely no justification for giving the wealthiest 1% of Americans a big tax cut in 2001 and 2003. We've seen the impact of that. We now have we've increased the national debt. National debt over the last 8 years, well, last 7 years, we still have a little bit of this year to go. We have 1 more month. No telling what will happen because we're already going to almost at $500 billion this year. But we went from $5.5 trillion to $9.3 trillion in the first 7 years. So we almost doubled the entire debt of the entire history of this country in 7 years. A lot of that was because we cut taxes when we couldn't afford to cut taxes, and we cut them, for the most part, for people who didn't need the cut. We need to restore those tax cuts. Barack Obama says he wants to restore those tax rates to people making over $250,000 a year. I think that's a good idea. I'm sorry if any of you are in that category here, but 99% of the people in this country aren't. Actually, a little bit more than 99%. So that's one thing we have to do. But that's not the only thing that we have to do, and that by itself is not going to begin to bring the deficit down. We need to do a couple things. One is, we need to end the war in Iraq. Which is costing us $10 billion a year. And when you spend $10 billion a year in a war, that's not an investment. You shoot a rocket off or a bullet off, that's not an investment. There's never going to be a return on that money. But if you spend that same $10 billion on infrastructure, on education, on early childhood health care, these are the types of things that are investments. And even though you may not be able to reduce the deficit in the short term, you're creating income streams down the road. Let me give you an example, one very easy example to show how education can change the financial picture. If you're a high school graduate right now, your projected income is $22,000 to $25,000. At $22,000 to $25,000, you're going to be eligible for Medicaid. You're going to get the Earned Income Tax Credit. You're going to probably get food stamps. And so you are going to be subsidized by American families making more money than that, making over the average. If you can get just a 2-year associate degree, so you're going just 2 years more of school, you've raised your projected income from $22,000 to $25,000 to $40,000 to $45,000. You're no longer eligible for Medicaid. You're not going to get a ETC. You've doubled your contribution to Social Security, so you've helped stabilize that system. You've doubled your contribution to Medicare, so you've helped stabilize that. 30 seconds, okay. Anyway, you can see you can change the whole dynamic of how people are productive members of society versus people who actually are subsidized. Enough of that. Let's see if I can get through the last two in about 20 seconds. Healthcare disparities we've talked about. We've got a lot of problems with that. Universal health care, I believe, is the answer. But we also are doing some things right now. There's a minority and health disparities piece of legislation that I've co-sponsored. We've gotten some earmarks for the community because the community has a very good program looking into mental health disparities and trying to figure out how to correct those. So I'm very supportive of those. Final question. I can do this in one sentence. Address your views on inclusiveness and pay equity, including the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act and affirmative action. I was a co-sponsor of Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. We just passed the Pay Equity Act, guarantees equal pay for women. First time in 14 years we've been trying to get that bill passed. We finally passed it in the House. We need to pass it in the Senate. Thank you very much.